Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody. Jazakumullah khair for attending, and welcome to our monthly book club meeting, Nova Book Club meeting. We are here, blessed to have all of you here for our discussion. This month we are discussing this book, Why We Sleep. And it's a fascinating book. I've read through most of it. It's a very dense, thick book. Basically, it talks about 30% of your life. If like 33%, a third of your life sleeping, should be sleeping 8 hours a day. And it's the fascinating introduction that the author has, Matthew Walker, PhD. He is he's a professor of neuroscience psychology at the University of California at Berkeley. He's the director of the Center for Human Sleep Science and a former professor of psychiatry at Harvard University. He's published like hundreds of articles. He's given hundreds of talks. There's also a Google talk where he went and talked to the leadership of Google about this. And I'm really blessed that Brother Ahmed Abu Jbara, who's going to lead the discussion here, recommended this book like a year ago, close to a year ago. And the more I read about this book inside the book, the more like I was stunned about how much I've lost in terms of sleep and what it could have done to us. Dr. Ahmed Abu Jbara is from Gaza, Palestine. He has a PhD in IT. He works with Azad Investments with the rest of the brothers here who are from Azad. And again, I want to thank you for this book. And without any further delay, please take over.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. It's definitely an interesting book. I mean, to be honest, when I read the book, I haven't read it before that. I was looking for some recommendations. I found it on one of the lists, online that recommend kind of good reads. So I was interested, and I recommended it as well. So I learned a lot, and as you said, Dr. Tariq, it's definitely at least 33% of our life would be covered by this book. So, so many things I learned from it, and also it's interesting how many things I could kind of link to things that I've experienced before, like regarding like memory and how things, how you remember things. What's the best way to let's say to study for exams and to be prepared for for anything important in your life, and so many other things. So let me actually share my screen. So I have some slides here, so I can go through, and then I'll go through the presentation I have. So give me a second to share my screen. And I think the host has to give me the ability to do that. So Dr. Tariq, would you mind make me a co-host or a presenter?
Just give me a second.
Sure.
Dr. Tariq, if you go in there, participants, and you click on his name and then make host.
Yep, I have it now. Thank you. Okay. So share screen, and let's see, share.
Good.
You see my screen now? Let me make it full screen first. So, okay, sounds good. So, Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. Definitely an interesting book by Dr. Matthew Walker. And frankly, while I was reading the book, there are many occasions where you just say, Subhanallah, the things that are uncovered by science and how we could relate this to some beliefs we have. So I thought I would start the presentation with some ayat from Quran that talk about sleep. يقول الله تعالى وهو الذي جعل لكم الليل لباسا والنوم سباتا وجعل النهار نشورا. يقول أيضا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا. يقول قل أرأيتم إن جعل الله عليكم النهار سرمدا سرمدا إلى يوم القيامة من إله غير الله يأتيكم بليل تسكنون فيه أفلا تبصرون. كما حديث عن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم أطفئوا المصابيح بالليل إذا رقدتم وغلقوا الأبواب إلى آخر الحديث. سبحان الله يعني I mean another thing that caught my attention like in many in the book, the writer would refer to Mother Nature, and I would say Subhanallah. So with that, I would skip to or get to the book itself. A quick thing on the bio, I mean on the author, and Dr. Tariq already actually covered most of this. So he's definitely a high-profile public intellect, you know, that talks about sleep and its impact on human health. He's director of sleep and neuroimaging lab. He's a professor of neuroscience and psychology at the University of California, Berkeley. He has given so many talks, contributed to hundreds of scientific research studies and so on. So, I mean, we have a scientific book, I would say here, based on scientific research, and it's actually throughout the book, the author talks about so many experiments and labs that have been done by him, by his team, and many other scientists that he actually quoted in the book. So the book itself is kind of, it has four parts. First one talks about, you know, sleep, the thing called sleep, kind of introduction. And actually, it covers some very important things about sleep that we'll talk about shortly. And the next part, the second part, it talks about why should we sleep, which is definitely something we need to discuss more and actually learn more about. It talks then in part 3 about how, why, and what are dreams. So it focuses here on this third part on dreams, trying to understand what causes dreams and what impact dream has on our lives and so on. And then the last part, it kind of gets into some more kind of modern kind of issues related to sleep patterns and, you know, depending on sleeping bells and how the society transformed in the last few years, or maybe the last actually decades, I would say, a few decades in terms of the amount of sleep, the quality of sleep, and so on, and some kind of conclusions remarks. So with that, I will start going through these parts. And the way I've done, you know, this, I have close to 20 slides. There are like 16 chapters in the book. Each part each part has a few chapters. So in general, it has one slide for each chapter. For others, it might have a few more. So before I get into the book and start discussing the book chapters and the topics covered in the book, I wonder if any one of you here would like to give any comment or share anything. And actually, one last comment here. It's a bit challenging for me. I know most of the attendees here are physicians and doctors. I'm far away from this field. You know, my background is all computer science, computer engineering, and information technology. So please help me if I miss, you know, kind of if I don't cover anything scientifically correct as it should be here. So, so anyone has any comment before we get started here?
Yeah, I do. So I think we should all brace that a lot of the information here is new information. It's the 20 past years worth of research in the sleep field, not only by the author, but he also quotes a lot of those who did that. And the fascinating thing is when he mentioned those trials, and then will tell you how groundbreaking it was and how stunning to the sleep community during that research. You will see part of it, especially in the first part, how like billions of dollars are being spent, for example, by the US military to try to find like one of the birds that doesn't sleep while it migrates, and how it does it, trying to come up with this called the non-sleeping soldier that can fight without sleep. So there's a lot of things, brace yourself to it. What I was stunned about is my kids know about this because they learn it here in schools. When I was discussing this every day, I would come and we discuss at the table, and I would be surprised that oh, we know that. You didn't know that? So they would make fun of me during that. So just brace yourselves for this.
Yeah, thank you. I had some interesting discussions with my kids about this as well. So yeah, same kind of experience. So anyway, so in the first chapter, actually, the first part of the book, talking about the thing called sleep. It starts talking about, like, you know, some chronic sleep, deprivation, and how it has so many effects on the physical and mental, mental and physical effects on health and the human body. How it is actually so vital that, you know, we have, we know we have three main functions in our life: eat, drink, and reproduce. But we usually don't pay attention to the fourth drive, the fourth kind of biological drive, which is sleep. And a typical, human being would sleep, normally would sleep like 8 hours a day. So that's definitely 1/3 of our life here that we're talking about. It's also interesting, going through this chapter with all the experience that get covered here, you know, how complex sleep is. We think of sleep as you just close your eyes and, wake up the next morning, but so many things actually happen during the night, so many phases, so many, changes actually happen inside the brain, the human body, and all these things. So, that's why sleep here is very important, actually. It's, the shorter you sleep, that's based on experience and based on science here. The shorter people sleep, the shorter their life could be. It's found that like 2/3 of adults throughout all developed nations fail to obtain the recommended 8 hours of nightly sleep. And this is kind of a pattern with, like, the more modern society these days, with all, like, the job requirements and all the, I would say, the devices that we have around us that keep us distracted, maybe from sleep and all these things. So again, there are so many things here that sleep has, that has effects on the human body, and including the immune system, the emotions, and the list goes on and on. So it's interesting, and I think the most thing that I got from this chapter is to think about sleep as, like, a fourth main biological drive, same as eating, drinking, and reproducing. So that's basically the main kind of outcome I got from this chapter. It does actually cover so many other things, but this is here a quick kind of summary for this chapter. So any comment before I get to the next one? Okay, so in chapter 2, actually, this is also was one of the most interesting chapters I read, because of how it actually explained the cycles that we go through when we sleep, and the forces that affect, sleep patterns and so on. I've actually included here some graphs from the book that explain some of these. So it's found actually that everyone has, what is called a circadian rhythm. This is kind of the biological clock inside our brain that kind of makes us go through these cycles of being asleep and awake. And in a typical, like, human, this circadian rhythm would be approximately 24 hours. With or without light, which is a topic by itself that got covered, extensively in this chapter as well, and the effect of light on this cycle, if it does affect it, or actually if the cycle actually goes on, even if a human doesn't get exposed to daylight and so on. So this biological clock in our brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is actually the part of our body in our brain that controls this circadian rhythm, that controls this cycle, the 24-hour cycle. And in addition to this, we have this biological clock, but it's not only this internal biological clock that controls the sleep patterns. We mainly have two forces here that decide our sleeping patterns. So we have the circadian rhythm, which basically I mean, if you can look at figure 1 here, it shows how this cycle goes up and down, basically, starting from noon to all the way to in the next day morning. So you have, like, ups and downs in terms of the need for sleep based on the cycle. And then there's another fourth, which is like a chemical the body generates, adenosine, which is kind of the chemical that builds the desired sleep, or the sleep pressure. So the figures here, like 4, 5, 7, and 6 and 7, show actually how these two forces work together to give us this feeling, the urge to sleep, the when to wake up, and the when actually you would feel the need or the urge to sleep the most, when you would feel awake the most, and so on. So if you look at figure 4, for example, we have these two cycles here called, two forces: process S, the sleep drive, which is the circadian rhythm, and then process C, which is the circadian rhythm, the wake drive, and the process S, which is the chemical adenosine that actually causes the sleep pressure. So starting from the morning, we wake up, the adenosine level starts going down. The circadian cycle also kind of starts going down, and so around maybe noon time, this is the time when we should be like the most awake, and it goes on and on. And I can talk about all these figures, but the thing is, it shows you here, like, how you would feel like, the need, the urge to sleep at certain times, and why at some other times you might not feel that. I mean, this chapter also talks about, like, how if you, for example, you don't sleep for the whole night and stay awake for the next morning, how, I mean, for those who tried this, who did that before, you could feel like, how sometimes, you do it, you don't sleep the whole night, and then the next morning you feel like you have some energy and you are kind of awake and can do stuff as usual. But then at some point in the night, in the day, maybe around noon, a little bit later, it's kind of you collapse, and that's basically because the drive urge caused by adenosine actually reaches a peak, and then the cycle also as well starts going up here with the urge to sleep. So these two forces together kind of drive the need for sleep in our bodies, and it's all basically controlled by these chemicals, like that the body generates, and controlled by the brain. This chapter also talks about the effect of caffeine specifically on the body and on sleep. It talks about jet lag, and it talks about this another chemical, melatonin, which is basically what is generated by the body as part of the circadian rhythm to urge the need for sleep. So an interesting kind of experiment that I thought I would share with you here is, like, the effect of caffeine on the body, and they had this experiment giving some spiders, like some different types of drugs, and trying to find out what effect this would be on their capability of building their webs. And this diagram here shows that effect, how distorted these spiders were based on the different types of drugs they had. And caffeine, the last one in the corner, the right bottom corner, actually is the effect of caffeine on these spiders. So another thing this chapter covered, how jet lag also has that effect also on our sleep rhythm. And I think this is something we all, experience, at least have experienced before. I've experienced it many times. How, if you fly, maybe like, even if you go from East Coast in the United States to the West Coast with the 3-hour difference, which I've done recently, I mean, you feel like that effect of jet lag on your sleep cycle and how distorted it becomes and all that. So an interesting chapter, definitely. It explained a lot about how, you know, the forces, these two forces affect our sleep rhythms and cause the urge for sleep, I would say.
Sorry, Ahmed. Which on that web, what is that speed? Can you explain how they do that speed intervention?
Speed is like a substance, like a,
Yep.
it's like a drug. Like
Yep.
yeah, brothers who joined us, please mute your microphones. Brother Rahman and Brother Mazen, if you could just mute your microphone.
I'm just trying to do that, brother. Thank you.
So yeah, I don't know exactly what type of drug speed is, but it's definitely a drug type, and this diagram is showing its effect on this, like, you know, spider and how it's building it up. So any comment, anything anyone would like to add here?
Yeah, the nice thing, he talks about that experiment, how they discovered the circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
There was a group of scientists that went into the
cave.
Into the cave. I know that cave, it's in Kentucky. I know exactly where it is. They went very deep where there's no sun, no light, nothing.
Yep.
And they did not take with them like anything. And they found out that you have an internal clock that does not rely on light. And you're able to wake up and go to sleep just based on that. And they found out the human circadian rhythm is 24 hours and 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
It's not 24 hours as you would think.
Yep.
So that was one fascinating aspect. And then he talks about melatonin and the use of melatonin.
Yep.
I don't know if you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, later on, I think I have, because it's mentioned many, you know, in many places in the books. I didn't want just to read it, but definitely, yeah, the use of melatonin as like a sleeping pill, and how actually it doesn't have that, you know, expected effect, I would say. So, yeah.
Sorry, speed is methamphetamine. It's addictive drug.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole point, if you can go back, brother, to that slide, the whole point of that slide is that this is the normal. So this is on the left is that the spider web. It's beautiful, fascinating. Then they subjected those spiders to LSD, marijuana, speed, and caffeine. And look at the spider web that was affected by caffeine. If you think that caffeine is going to do you good and make you awake, it's doing you the opposite. So that's one thing. That's the whole point of this. It's that caffeine is worse than marijuana when it comes to how you construct and build things.
Yeah, definitely, and he talked in this chapter about like the effect of caffeine in the human body and how it actually kind of blocks the brain from going into the circadian cycle, and gives you that feeling that you are awake. But the moment that you start losing that, like, you know, effect of the drug, that's when you have that crash, or like a crash, and you need more caffeine to stay awake, and it becomes more of like addictive kind of substance more than just something we enjoy. Yeah. Okay, so keep going. Chapter 3 talks about, I mean, defining sleep and generating sleep, and this is where it talks about the different kind of stages of sleep that we go through during the night. So, and it's interesting how they actually got to learn about this. You know, there's this kind of experiment that they had with a baby in the 50s, when scientists actually noticed the eye and how it was blinking, you know, during, you know, the time when that infant was sleeping, and that actually kind of introduced them to the concept of the different stages of sleep, mainly the low frequency, non-rapid E movement sleep, and the high frequency rapid eye movement sleep. So these are basically the two main kind of types of sleep that we go through. When we are actually sleeping. So in the in this, like, non-rapid eye movement phase, this is basically the deep sleep that we go through. And this type by itself has 4 stages, 1 to 4. So, I mean, we go through these phases throughout, the time we're sleeping, if we're doing it at night. REM, rapid eye movement, this is actually a phase, or like, a stage of sleep where actually the brain waves are almost like we are awake. I mean, and I'll show this in another slide, maybe the next slide. You will see actually the brain waves while being awake and while going through this phase, REM, rapid eye movement. They're almost the same. This is also the stage or the phase where we have dreams and where make connections between things, that we have in our memory and so on. So in general, we have 3 states. Waking state, this is for reception. This is when we receive things from the environment around us through our senses. Non-rapid eye movement sleep, this is the time, the deep sleep, when we'll be doing reflections on things that we have in our memory. We'll talk more about this in the next few slides. And the rapid eye movement sleep, this is where we are integrating these memories and the things that we have learned throughout the day and so on. So this chapter also talks about other things like how to identify sleep, how to identify if someone is not sleeping or not dying, let's say, based on muscles and if they're relaxed or not, based on, the person position and so many other things. So it also talks about how someone actually could know if he has slept or not, if he or she has slept or not. This is based on feeling of time, feeling of surroundings, and so many other things. In general, we assess sleep by brainwave activity, by eye movement, muscle tone, and all these together are known as BSG. Which is, again, the way we assess if someone is sleeping or not. And this is kind of the technique they use in the lab, and he mentioned this a few times in the book, like, how they, conduct these experiments and measure, brain waves and kind of identify which stage of sleep, which, state of sleep someone would be going through. So still going through chapter 3 here. They also found that, going through, while we are sleeping, we go through kind of cycles of sleep. Each one is around 90 minutes. So we start like, the first half of the night, let's say, it would be mostly NREM, non-rapid eye movement. This is the deep sleep kind of phase. And the second half usually consists of REM sleep. So if you look at this actual diagram here, it shows how, you're awake, you start going in very slightly in REM, then you go stage 1, stage 2, all the way to stage 3 and 4. And this is where you see the, the slow wave sleep kind of pattern. And then the cycle after 90 minutes, kind of go through another cycle. And towards the end of the sleep period, we see it's less of NREM and it's more of REM. This is the time when we are sleeping the most, dreaming the most, and this is the time when our brains are actually trying to do integration of memories and trying to inference, new information based on things that we have learned and so on. The diagram on the bottom here, the one I talked about earlier, this is where, like, we see the difference between the brain waves when someone is awake, someone is going through deep NREM sleep and REM sleep. And we can see here again that the waves of someone being awake and someone who's going through REM sleep are pretty similar. And eventually, he talks about this in the book actually a lot. When we are sleeping, we're not actually sleeping. Like our brains are idle, are not doing anything. And that's why this REM sleep is very important, because it's as active as being awake, doing some things, you know, a few things, other things, you know, in our brains, again, to integrate memories, we have the dreams throughout that period and so on. So frankly, when we're sleeping, we are actually, I mean, our bodies are sleeping maybe, or like, you know, are idle, but our brain is very active, doing many other things. So NREM is mainly designed to remove the neural connections that are not needed in our brains. REM, and this is again what was mentioned in this chapter and what the author talked about here, REM, where sleep actually helps in strengthening the remaining connections. These are the neural connections in our brains. It's interesting actually, while I was also reading this, I always think, like, you know, back to my field, computer science, and how we are trying, and actually we have been doing this for quite some time, trying to mimic how the brain functions, you know, to achieve artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence these days, we have actually, you know, different types of kind of modeling, you know, intelligence, and one of those that are pretty very well known and widely used these days, called neural networks, basically mimicking how the neurons in the brain work, and trying to bring this to computer systems and achieve artificial intelligence. So another just reflection here on that I kind of felt while reading this book. So I think that would be my kind of conclusion for chapter 3 here. So again, anyone would like to add any comment or anything here?
Yeah, I have a comment. You know, like when you showed that graph between the awake and the REM.
Yeah, this one.
Remind the Surah Al-Kahf, وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ
Yep. Your voice is so weak, so far away. I mean,
وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now.
So it just came to my mind, you know, would that be like, you know, wondering if Ashab al-Kahf were actually going through most of their time through the REM, where then they start acting like almost they're awake. وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ I mean, it's really interesting, this analogy. وَتَحْسَبُهُم أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has
like this.
that.
Yep.
Dr. Ahmed, now of course there was research regarding REM and non-REM, and how many cycles of REM do you need to actually feel rejuvenated.
Yep.
There were some people who were trying to say, well, if I get REM for one cycle, how long is my cycle versus somebody else? So these are average, you know, 11 p.m. to midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., based on the circadian rhythms. Yep. And you can actually see that not all REMs are equal. Not all, there's a significant level of asymmetry between the REMs, even though the rapid eye movements do mimic, and that is how we know when somebody is in REM sleep, that you actually need at minimum few cycles to feel rejuvenated and to strengthen the neural connection. So that's very important, because some people said, I'll just sleep 2 hours every day, you know, or 2 hours and that will be one cycle for me and I'm just perfect. And that is not true. That is not correct.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also the author talked about this specifically, and the importance of having like a full night of sleep, which is kind of estimated for you know, a normal human being to be like 8 hours, so that you can go through these cycles and get towards the end of it and get enough of the REM sleep that the body needs. So I totally agree with your comment here, based on what I've read in the book as well. Yeah.
Also, another comment, Dr. Ahmed. So about the REM and non-REM, and actually the deep sleep. So basically, and there is a lot of information coming up about this deep sleep. And by the way, now I think they're limiting it to 3 stages, so the 1, 2, and 3. Because if you look on the graph, there's actually stage 3 and stage 4 are actually bundled together. So most new publications just say stage 3 just for simplicity. And but basically, if you look at stage 3 as being the deep sleep, and in addition to the REM, the deep sleep is actually very important biologically for as you mentioned, learning, healing, and like a new skills, so recovery basically. So people who just don't get that deep sleep or longer sleep, you're just going on like basically all your systems are going on automatic. So you have difficulty acquiring new skills or new information. So that deep sleep, the brain is actually active. So if you look at a computer with a computer system, how like you actually, the computer is silent, but in the background is doing is hibernation or is actually reorganizing the information.
Yes.
So in a deep sleep, actually reorganizing this information. And if you look at the scholars in the history, is actually they wake up during Salat al-Fajr, and then they come up with new conclusions and new understanding of the ayat and stuff like that, because they got to that stage of where the information are organized and connected, and actually there's an active connections in the brain areas that can establish during that period. So people who do not experience that deep sleep and do not get to that point, they're actually really living on the surface. And what really worried me, the slide that you presented before about the spider web, and I had to look at it really carefully. When we look at this new generation that are coming, they're all for like energy drink and caffeine drink. They don't want to sleep. They want to keep going. They want to go on the speed. But you know, the speed is actually where you're missing out on that deep sleep and learning and skills. So I think, you know, more studies are going to come and show is actually this is really very detrimental for especially children during growth period, when you have to establish those connections and those habits, because as you said, circadian rhythms. Now the question is, what happened with the circadian rhythms when people have erratic lifestyle, such as like working at night, working longer hours, not resting, stuff like that. So, but that circadian rhythms is what get you into habits of doing things routinely. But with now the digital and people staying up at night, I mean, like big questions to be raised here. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. And I think some of this will come also later, you know, in the book and in the presentation here, some of the, you know, valuable comments that you shared here. But totally agree, especially the effect of caffeine and all these kind of, and also all the, you know, devices, light and everything else that affect our, like, you know, sleep quality, duration and all that.
Yeah, I think understanding this chapter, this specifically, is very crucial to understanding the book, because he puts in it all the, like, the data, the most recent data up to date about this. And when I read this chapter and looked at what we used to do, I remember when I was like back home in Syria and Damascus studying for the high school and then studying for college, you'd stay up all night studying, thinking you're, and then nothing is registering in you think it's registering. Then you go the next day to the exam and you know you've read it, but it's there, but you cannot find the answer. And you can swear on the Quran, by Allah, that you know the answer, but you will not know the answer. That's why sleep before studying, and study,
sleep after.
and then sleep after.
Yeah.
And each one has a job. The other thing that's fascinating, when you talk about this REM, the very early REM, when you just start waking, that takes you in like some twilight. You start seeing stuff just before sleeping. And what I found is that I get like some brilliant ideas during that first 5 to 10 minutes. And you think you get it, okay, I'm going to remember it the next day. And you are not going to remember it for a simple reason. It's in the hippocampus. And it's going to be like wiped out. So there is no way in you, whatever you think, can make connections. So I started to make a practice. If it's something very important to me, I will get up, I will write it, and go back to sleep. That's the only way I'll remember it the next day. And I made that as a habit for this specific. And a lot of discoveries happen in that time, and then in the REM time as well.
True. And again, I mean, more about this comes later in the book itself as well, when it talks about, you know, how, you know, effective, I mean, how people can be creative and come up with new ideas, you know, if they have good sleep rhythms and at what stage actually it happens. And also totally agree, I mean, making the connections when, like, you know, with, studying habits from old days, and how it would be more beneficial if you study something like 1 or 2 days before, sleep on it, and then, kind of come back to it. And then the exam day, you would do much better, definitely. So I think with this, we can go to the next chapter. Who, how, and how much. And in this chapter, actually, I have so much text here, but I'll try to go over this pretty quickly. I mean, in this chapter, the author tries to talk about how, like, other creatures actually sleep. I mean, focusing mainly on the animal kingdom. I mean, do they sleep? Do they have the same kind of patterns? Do they have the same kind of cycle? And so on. So in general, actually, it's interesting that sleep is actually a unifying feature. I mean, across the entire animal kingdom, all basically, creatures in the animal kingdom do sleep. I mean, but with different kind of cycles and rhythms and patterns. So elephants, for example, sleep for 4 hours. Lions need like 15 hours. Bats, 19 hours. Now, as it's written here in this chapter, I mean, there are many factors that affect, how much of sleep each, animal would need, based on the complexity of the nervous system, based on many other factors. So, so many things here in this chapter, talking mainly about differences between different animals and different creatures here. So, main points, sleep can change in the amount of time. Already give some examples. It can be different in the form as well. I mean, it's fascinating that, some animals actually sleep with half brain sleeping, and the other half is awake. And actually, I think the book here and the author gave examples on like some like whales and dolphins and so on, because these creatures actually, they will be like, kind of sleeping, but still need to be attending to the environment around us in case any threat comes and so on. So same thing actually happens with some bears when they are migrating, so, and so on. It's fascinating also when he talks about, like, here in this chapter, for us, like for someone, I mean, traveling to a new place, like sleeping in a hotel or, in a bed that, I mean, a place that you have never been to. And how, we usually don't have a good night's sleep the first day or first few days, and how this is actually related to how is our brain actually reacting to this change. So it's interesting. So in general, I mean, this book, as I said, talks about the duration and how different, species, different creatures sleep for different durations. The composition of sleep as well, like, some species, experience all stages of sleep, like humans. Some others might only have non-rapid eye movement sleep, like NREM. Some others might experience only REM sleep, and so on. I've just mentioned this example. Dolphins and whales don't abide by other moments sleeping. They don't experience REM phase at all, for example. Same thing, dolphins and whales, I mean, have only non-REM sleep that is unihemispheric. So they sleep with half a brain at a time. And so on. So, I mean, again, the book talks about duration, composition, the way of sleep, and sleep patterns among different species and creatures. And it's interesting, again, to see how all species actually have some form of sleep with some variation. So, any comments here?
I have a quick question. This is Abdurrahman Khan. I thought, I mean, how do you have the monophasic sleepers, and then you have the polyphasic sleepers?
Yes.
Churchill is a good example. How does the REM and NREM work for those who have cat naps and they come out as if they slept for about 8 hours, very fresh?
So I think the question is on, like, the pattern, like monophasic and biphasic.
Polyphasic, yeah.
Okay, and how they go through the different stages of sleep, REM and REM. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. And how does the brain work for those people? I know a few people who could just sleep for about half an hour and they look like they had it fresh. They're all set to go for another 8-10 hours without any problem.
I don't recall exactly how this was covered in this specific book. I mean, but what I recall is like, you know, and I think we'll talk about this later on. Some people who like sleep less and they have kind of some genetic kind of, I would say, I don't know if it's right to call it like an advantage or if like, you know, there's this gene that gives them this ability to sleep less than others and still be productive and still get, you know, all the benefits of sleep that other people would have. I think we can get to that later, but I mean, any other, you know, any one of the doctors here on the call who have more information about this can actually come in and help me here.
Well, there are still cultures, even back our own cultures, it is biphasic. So only here in the US, it's monophasic. So that's what he was talking about. And he was really criticizing the monophasic one where you just go ahead and sleep the night and then wake up and work all day to the evening, come back, eat, then go to sleep. And he brings startling evidence, like from research. If you wake up at, if you go to bed at 11, wake up at 7, go to work all day, 5, 6 o'clock, and then instead of going back home, go out with a friend, spend the night like eating, having fun all the way, and then it's all the way until like 2 o'clock in the morning. Start driving at 2 o'clock in the morning. You have not slept yet. When you drive 2 o'clock in the morning, having woken up 7 o'clock in the morning, you are driving like you are legally drunk. You're driving like you are legally drunk. He did that on students. So, and then he talks about the biphasic where it's prevalent more in Europe and in other countries where they take a siesta nap. That siesta nap is a phenomenal like way of re-energizing yourself. And from when I read this book, I've been trying to find a way to introduce a siesta into the day in my clinic. I know one of my friends, I know him from Kentucky, at 12 o'clock, that's the last patient, he doesn't see any patients. And from 12 to 1, no phone call makes it to him. So it's all received by the reception. He turns off the light. He has like a little thing, pulls off and sleeps for about an hour. And then he's good to go until like 11 o'clock at night. So he does that here. Google and Facebook and all those high-tech companies now have introduced a siesta, like mid-afternoon nap called the power nap. And he talks about how they came to call it a power nap because everything else didn't work from a marketing point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about like, you know, how that experiment with the students in Greece who some were allowed to get the siesta, some were not, like, you know, getting it, and the effect of this on their ability to comprehend and so on. So yeah, definitely. I mean, as you said, I mean, other culture and maybe even Western culture, you know, a few hundred years back, I mean, biphasic sleep was, or pattern was kind of also of, you know, a pattern that we'd see.
Now, okay, another comments about this is like when I think is the biphasic is maybe close to the natural circadian rhythm. So when you look at the children in the daycare, they actually give them a naps midday. Because basically the children, when they're running and going and learning, they get tired, and usually like around noon or afternoon, that's when they take their naps. And even in our Islamic cultures, the qaylula is very well known in the afternoon for the same reason. Now, and again, he's saying this is a pre-industrial, because the industrial is when the caffeine was introduced, all the stimulants were introduced. So now you're going against the biological clock, against the circadian rhythm, and now you want increased production and stop interruption during the day. So you have wanted long days of 7-8 hours, which is probably not biologically as how the body is to keep going nonstop for that period of time. It's probably need a rest in midday, but by doing this, you're actually getting the body to gonna get much more production, and then you sleep at night. I mean, I mean, I don't know. I have a theory, and I don't know if it's proven in this book or not. I didn't go through the whole thing, but I think it's biphasic is the default, is how we're most human function. But I think the industrial, we made it like single monophasic, just to increase production during the day. And now you get a discrepancy between different cultures, like in Europe, where they got used to the siesta, while here, because of the lifestyle and how we used to work and produce, is that we want to just work all day, and then you crash at night. So I personally, like, get better sleep if I get like siesta, even when my days are short or during the weekend. And I feel like I get even better quality when I get this midday sleep compared with the night sleep. And maybe that's because biologically, that's how our brain is functioning. Allahu A'lam.
Why is the author saying that forging this pattern of sleep, the biphasic, is has many negative effect on health? Ahmed?
Yes.
Why is that?
Can you say it again? I'm sorry, I missed.
Why is he saying that forging the biphasic sleep has many negative effects on health? I mean, if this is the biological evidence, the default.
No. He's saying
Actually, the book. I mean, the author says the opposite. Actually, I think
forging is saying foregoing. He's saying it's not forging, foregoing. So
foregoing. Okay.
Is it a typo here that I have? I don't know exactly where.
No, it's not a typo.
Foregoing.
Yes, it's foregoing. Yes. Yeah.
Foregoing. Okay. Foregoing. Okay. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's exactly.
I don't know why I read it. You're right.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the author in this chapter kind of proves what Dr. Assam was saying, that, biphasic is the more natural thing that humans actually need, or like, used to do before, and would makes more sense for them. Yes.
I see. Okay. It's the opposite. When I read it, I did not really see it well. Okay. Sorry for that.
No worries.
So this book recommends the biphasal sleep pattern?
Yeah, biphasal, yep.
Yes. Basically a nap, a power nap, whatever, siesta, whatever you call it. Yeah, the book supports this. I mean, the author does support this. Yep.
You can take this to your employer.
Industrialized nations.
Obviously, a nap in addition to basic 7 to 8 hours during night, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Any idea why it's just came to my idea? Why it's really like there is a recommendation from the Prophet, peace be upon him, not to sleep after the Asr. Is that anything mentioned, or anybody aware of evidence for that? Why to make Qailula between Dhuhr and Asr? Why not after Asr or near? It's makruh.
I think Bashar read somewhere in the book that sleeping, say, close to 5-6 p.m. is not really good because it will disrupt your sleep pattern. It has to be in the middle. It has to be, the body is ready for it.
Yeah, makes sense.
To what the Prophet Muhammad said.
So, excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we can get to the next slide here, chapter 5, changes in sleep across the lifespan. And this is actually interesting, another interesting topic to cover here, and actually it relates to some of the things that we just discussed, like, how infants, children, during adolescence and so on, the changes to sleep and the need for, like, the importance of sleep as well. So, I mean, starting with like infants, like while in the fetus, and 6 hours for NREM and 6 for REM, and the remaining hours are in an intermediate type of sleep. In the third trimester, the infant starts to spend about 2 to 3 hours a week, and then as infants grow up, there's a rise in the quality and intensity of sleep, deep sleep, as the child must build more connections. So, I mean, it's kind of, it evolves over time, and it's also important for you know, infants and children to have this kind of quality sleep. Like for young children and infants, it's more like a pattern of polyphasic sleep, in contrast to parents, where it's more of like monophasic or maybe biphasic. During adolescence, and REM sleep increases to build cognitive skills and reasoning. So more REM sleep for, I mean, during adolescence. Senior adults also need much sleep as they need it in midlife, and this is kind of clarifying something that we hear sometimes, that, like, you know, older people need less sleep. It's actually the opposite, according to the author here in this book. I mean, senior adults need as much sleep as they needed in midlife. It's the issue here is the senior adult sleep can decrease due to different, you know, causes and reasons. Like, you know, they might have quality issues, efficiency, and disrupted timing, again, with everything around us, you know, the light patterns and the, you know, devices and lifestyle and all these things get into sleep. But again, it's interesting how this two things I would say I get from this book. One, the importance of sleep throughout different phases of life, starting from, like, you know, in the fetus, when before born, and when after born, infants, children, adolescents, and all that. It does also talk here about like, you know, how you know, during adolescence, like, you know, like, you know, like teenagers maybe, how they start to develop this kind of forward kind of circadian rhythm, where they might sleep a little bit later, but they wake a little bit later as well, and how, you know, the early kind of school schedule might affect their quality and quantity of sleep and all that stuff. So interesting things actually here that make us think, one, rethink how we deal with our children and how we basically help them get better quality sleep, I would say. So again, I think so many interesting things I learned from this chapter. Any comment here? Anyone has anything to add?
I think it is this chapter where he talks about like a very important aspect of how before the humans, that monkeys used to sleep on trees.
Yep.
And when you sleep on a tree, you're trying to do two things. Number one, you're getting away from bloodsuckers, which are like on the ground. And you go up and you're trying to get away from the vultures, or like lions and hyenas, to eat you. So you try to go up. However, once you're asleep and you go into this REM sleep, you lose all muscle tone. When you lose muscle tone, you drop, and when you drop to the ground, you're broken. You're either broken or you're eaten alive. He thinks, he brings this theory that he thinks that the sleep and standing up is where humans evolved, and that's what took them into their path of their like civilization. It is being able to be able to sleep on the ground without falling, and to be able to walk straight. So he brings this connection between sleep and the Homo erectus, call it the Homo erectus, meaning the human that can walk, meaning you no longer need to sleep on a tree. So otherwise you're dead. So he brings this and introduces like sleep as a very important element. That was a fascinating read in the book for me to read what he talked about.
Yeah. Okay, so get going here. Now we get into part 2 of the book, And this is where the focus would be, like, why should we sleep? I mean, what are the benefits that we get from sleep? And it talks about different things. So in chapter 6 starts talking here about the benefits of sleep for the brain. And, you know, actually, I think like the title of the chapter also has like this thing, your mother and Shakespeare in you. I mean, mothers also always tell their kids, you need to sleep early and get good sleep and so on. I think Shakespeare in one of his plays, Macbeth, I believe, said something about, you know, the importance of good quality sleep and so on. I forget the exact phrase there, but and also I think worth highlighting here this paragraph that I think Dr. Saleh you shared earlier, kind of trying to get us interested in reading the book. Like, scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes your life longer. It enhances your memory, makes you more creative. It makes you look attractive. It keeps you slim, and it protects you from cancer and dementia. I mean, so many good things. And sleep is the answer for all of these, apparently. I mean, the effect sleep has on the human body physically is like, you know, it's impressive. I mean, it's beyond the things I could even imagine or think before reading this book. So sleep is a medicine by itself that can offer many cures. All types and stages of sleep are equally important in this. They cover different aspects and they do different good things to our bodies. Another thing also, and I think we talked about this, sleep by itself is a state of consciousness. I mean, like, where the brain is very active and doing so many things, like transitions through different stages. It has many functions. And here it talks about something I think that we briefly talked about earlier, like, you know, sleeping the night before, how this can help you, like, retrieve memory from, like, the neocortex instead of the hippocampus. I mean, think of the hippocampus as like your temporary memory. I like to make this connection with computers. I mean, every time I read this in the book, I remember how computers work, like, you know, with temporary memory or cache or whatever, like, you know, permanent storage. So sleep the night after, you know, how, you know, you read something, you learn something, and then you sleep, and your brain basically will consolidate all the newly learning facts and will prevent this you from forgetting these. So again, importance of, you know, sleeping the night before, so that the memory will be like, you know, also like moving, you know, the data or memories you have in the hippocampus, which is the temporary memory, to the permanent one, the neocortex, and giving you a fresh, you know, free space in the hippocampus to get more, to learn more. And then again, how then sleeping after that will help to consolidate the learning facts. Sleeping to forget, and the importance actually of forgetting things. We do forget things, and you know, we don't have an unlimited capacity to remember everything, and that's why our brains during the night will actually be working on remembering new facts and trying to you know, letting go some of and maybe some, you know, memories that are not that important, and help you retain and maintain the important stuff. Sleeping for other memories, and this is actually interesting topic that he covers here, how, you know, sleeping helps even with like muscle memory, like skills that we do. It's not just things that we learn like facts, it's like the skills. And I think he talks about athletes and how they can basically improve. I think one of the examples he gave, like a pianist, I mean, practicing like playing, you know, a new thing, and then, you know, sleeping and doing it again, you know, it becomes, or she becomes, like doing it in a much better way. Again, I could relate to this personally, like, you know, many times you would learn something and, you know, you sleep on it, and then the next day you feel better and you keep practicing. But like the effect of sleep on you know, kind of strengthening the learning and the muscle memory as well with skills. So I think, again, another interesting concepts out of this chapter here with, like, you know, the effects of sleep on our bodies and on our life. I will just cover this chapter, I mean the 7 as well, because it's kind of related here. I just talked about this and the effect of sleep deprivation, you know, on many other things. So in chapter 6, it talks about the benefits of sleep. In chapter 7, it kind of talks about more of like, you know, what would happen if you don't get enough sleep, if the sleep quality you are getting is not as good. And it talks about, I mean, this chapter, many things like sleep deprivation and how it can lead to, you know, crashes and accidents while driving. I mean, this micro sleep thing, I personally, reading the book, kind of recognize this. I mean, yeah, I've experienced this before, like, you know, sometimes having to drive late at night, you know, for whatever reason, and you feel like, you know, you can't resist. I mean, you feel like you lost it for a second, like in this micro sleep thing. So again, how this affects like athletes and how they basically, I mean, the number of injuries that athletes might have if they have less sleep. So, I mean, this graph on the right here shows, like, you know, for athletes who sleep like 6 hours, their chance of injury goes up to like 73–74%. If they get more sleep all the way to 9 hours, this goes down to less than 20%. On the left side, sleep loss and car crashes. So, I mean, sleep 6 to 7 hours, you know, 1.3, you know, chances that you can get in a crash. Sleep less than 4 hours, this gets up to like 12 times or like 11.5 times the chances that you can get in an accident. So pretty interesting facts here and things about how, you know, sleep can, or let's say the lack of sleep, you know, what effects it might have on us. Emotions and memory as well. If you don't sleep well at night, it will change your mood and disrupt your emotionally. And I think, again, we can relate to this. I mean, if you don't get a good night's sleep, next day, things are not as good. Also, how, like, you know, decrease in NREM sleep can reduce the ability in memory. Kind of in a way similar to what someone suffering from Alzheimer would feel. So, I mean, these two chapters here, pretty interesting facts on the benefits of sleep and also what could happen if we don't get enough sleep. So, any comments?
Yeah, why he's saying like decrease in NREM sleep? Like, what about REM sleep? Like, why? Like, I understand that the REM sleep is the deeper sleep, correct, than the NREM.
No, actually, the NREM is the deep sleep phase. The REM sleep is like, you know, the sleep, as I understand it, is where the brain is active almost as you are awake. The muscles would be relaxed. It's kind of, the body is paralyzed, but the brain will be so active, making connections and, you know, integrating information and so on. So now,
which is the higher quality? Which is the higher quality of them? Which is the one that is deeper, that considered to be the higher quality, the NREM or the REM?
So, I mean, I think the easiest way to look at it is the non-REM deep sleep is important, like for healing and for health, for immune system, and learning. But the REM is, I think, more for the creativity and more like, you know, learning and new skills of innovation. But like maybe for old people, because, you know, once, you know, you lose that ability to heal and recover, and that's when you lose brain functions and memory affected.
I think what I got from the book is like they are equally, I mean, they are both important. I don't think, you know, one is more like, you know, higher quality or more important than the other. I mean, it's like different functions. I think they complement each other. Like we need both NREM and REM. As Dr. Sam said, I mean, NREM has certain functions and, I mean, does certain things to our brain and body. REM does other things. So, Dr. Tariq, you had something to say.
Yeah, so the NREM basically is, after a long day of working, your system, your brain now is exhausted, it's been metabolizing and it's been having some waste. So when you go to sleep, as soon as you get into sleep, you go into the deep sleep, which is the NREM sleep. The area that starts it, it's in this area. It's in the frontal lobe. It sends like deep waves that scan the brain all the way to the end. And they come in pulses, like pulse after pulse after pulse. And basically what this NREM sleep, as it goes deep, it starts taking away all that waste and taking it out from the brain. It starts taking all the stuff that you have placed all day in the brain and recategorizing it. It categorizes it in every, so that it takes it away from your short-term memory and it stores it into the long-term memories, into those areas. So later you can bring it and like retrieve it from where you want it. If you don't go into that deep sleep, you're gonna lose whatever you studied, and you're not going to feel, you're not going to remember anything. He also talks about this, and I want to bring this, especially for the doctors who moonlight. Next day, I was reading this and I was stunned because he's talking exactly about me, like 20 years ago. He says about this in a footnote: common myths that are of no use in helping to overcome drowsiness while driving include turning up the radio, winding down the car window, blowing cold air on your face, splashing cold water on your face, talking on the phone, chewing gum, slapping yourself, pinching yourself, punching yourself, promising yourself a reward for staying awake. I have done all of them except the last one. I swear to God. You're trying to hate yourself, and I bet you every single one of us who's moonlighted, and then you go back the next day to work, and you're slapping yourself. And he's saying, he tells you, do not do that, because there is something called a micro sleep. And a micro sleep is where you lose 2 seconds. And it is worse than being drunk, because when you're drunk, your reflexes are slow, but you still have reflexes. They're retarded, they're tardy. In micro sleep, you don't have any reflexes. You're asleep. And I remember this, subhanAllah, when we were coming back from Hajj. Until today, me and my wife remember it. We were coming back. It's the long journey back from Hajj to Syria, from Syria to Cincinnati, and then from Cincinnati driving 2 hours to home. And it was like a second, and there was something coming and about to hit us. And I remember it like swerving. And he says this, a lot of deaths that happen every day because of the micro sleep, especially in truck drivers. And when it happens in a truck driver, it takes away the lives of others as well. And he talks about the sleep studies that happen on pilots as well, because those are they take off, they're fresh and awake. And the most important and crucial element in flying a jet is landing. And when he's landing, he's sleep deprived. So that's when they introduce the power nap. And today on transcontinental types of flights, there are 2 crews. One crew that goes on and drives and flies. The other crew goes and sleeps. And then they switch. So the other group comes up and the other group goes down and sleeps. And there are cameras monitoring them so that they go to sleep. They're not just going like playing cards or chess. They have to go to sleep to be able to land the jet safely, and they're not sleep deprived. So that session it was fascinating in that.
Yeah, I would like to add something to, like, from another perspective. Like, if we compare the working of the brain to like a building, working in an office, right? And the employees come in the morning and they work and they leave at 5, right? And then imagine if they continue to work the whole night. So the maintenance staff, the cleaning staff will not be able to do their work. So, and they leave, and the maintenance and the cleaning staff will leave. And then when the employees come the second day, they will find everything messed up. Nothing is clean. Everything is bad. So this is very similar to probably how the brain is working. You know, when we leave the office, for example, and other people start working and cleaning and maintaining the building and everything else, it looks to me this is similar to the brain unconsciously working in the background and fixing stuff. It's fixing itself, it's consolidating memory and helping other body organs, at the same time. So the maintenance issue, it seems to be something a part of this.
In fact, you don't know if you came across this, if you remember, he talks about this exact example with the brain of what it does. So the brain cells, as they work and they produce all that debris, let's call it, that needs to be cleaned at the end of the day at night. So what happens is every cell, like neurocell, is surrounded by special cells called the glios. Yes. And those they drain all that and goes to the spinal fluid. So he says what happens at night is the cells shrink in size. So, and then the cerebrospinal fluid comes in, flushes it, and takes it out. And see, he brings that example. He adds to your example, Jamal, that imagine if in a building after if the work is over, the offices shrink in size, so that those cleaning people will be able to go in between, sweep it, and then on top of that, you get a power jet clean of the whole brain. Imagine, wow. And this happens to each one of us, but with the condition that you get a full night of sleep.
Exactly. And you get like this refreshed, feeling very similar to coming to a nice, clean office in the morning. Very.
Yeah. Is there any link between the increased number of cancers and the fact that the human in our days sleeping less than their ancestors? That could be the reason why, people are dying more with cancer. We're seeing more all type of cancers. Is there anything
So this slide, if you look at the third kind of column here, immune system, cancer has also been linked to sleep loss. Tumor growth amplified with the lack of sleep. So
that is really mind-boggling. This is really unbelievable. Like, no wonder now you see, because really human is sleeping less. I mean, we're really sleeping less than before. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just linking to what you just said, Brother Bashar. I mean, like, how sleep actually affects our, our human body from physical perspective, how it can be linked to heart problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, how it can affect the immune system, and with less sleep means you can get risk of catching common cold or any other infections faster or easier than if you get a good quality sleep. Cancer as well, we just talked about this and how it is linked to sleep loss, and how they could see that tumor growth amplified with the lack of sleep. Obesity as well, and how being sleep deprived, getting insufficient sleep leads to increase in the intake of food and all this. So, I mean, it's just impressive actually, all these kind of effects that lack of sleep or being sleep deprived would have on the human body.
If I may, it's very interesting. Is there any correlation between sleep and oxygen level? And I say this because a few comments were made about driving. I have noticed when I was working as well as taking long drives with my family, in the car, what I have noticed, and I think it may have been AARP, this is, I'm taking you at least 10, 15 years ago or more. And if I have 4 people in the car and the windows are closed, Okay, what I use, I think they said, do not focus straight on one target, the car in front of you. They were encouraging a look in the side mirror, look in the rear view mirror, constantly who's around, and the movement of the eye. And if you feel that you want to, they were saying that if some car is behind you, just slow down, let him pass. And then, that activity, and then fresh air. Many of the times in the winter, particularly, people will have the recycled air, the air in the cars, rather than getting fresh air. I'm wondering if there are any studies done. And another example, I myself, even in the winter, as much as possible, I turn the fan on in the bedroom. That circulation, I don't know if there's anything done, if deprivation of the level of oxygen, would that impact, your sleep and the REM?
I mean, I don't recall the book talking about this, like, making this correlation or this connection between level of oxygen and sleep. But again, I mean, I'll leave it back to the doctors here on the call if they have anything to add.
I tried also when you're driving the car with family, particularly, tell them, we got women in the car. They say, "Oh, my hair is going." They're concerned. I said, "No, I gotta get fresh air." So cross ventilation, passenger side in the back seat, and the driver's side, I open it, and then the other way. It wakes up everybody. They start talking. Besides talking, and you're alert. And I start looking always in the rear view mirror and the side mirror constantly. So I don't focus right now in the front of the car. So I hope this helps you. It has helped me tremendously.
I mean, if I can just comment about this, like when you're in a closed area such as a car and you have 4 people breathing, you're producing CO2. And then, so like we know, like scientifically, if your CO2 increases in the brain or in the body, it actually causes a CO2 narcosis. Basically, it makes you sleepy, or it will depress your brain function. So that's the way I can look at it. Is like maybe when you're opening and getting a fresh air, you're trying to flush that CO2 so you can get more awake. So that's how I would interpret it.
The oxygen level is really very, very strictly controlled. So it's not like the oxygen drop. And like Dr. Islam just mentioned, it is the CO2. And if CO2 just goes up a little bit, you will feel that effect. But if you are in the micro sleep level, nothing is going to help. And here you need to stop on the side, take a 20 to 30 minute nap. And then when you wake up, don't just go ahead and start driving because you're still in sleep inertia. He calls it sleep inertia. Drink a coffee, wait another 20 to 30 minutes, and then start driving. And then it's not going to last you long. So you're going to try to reach your destination so you can go ahead and take your beauty sleep at that time.
Thank you.
Just an FYI, your oxygen level at when you sleep is lower than what you are in daytime. So.
Thank you all for tuning in. So keep going, and now we get into part 3, which is also another kind of interesting part of the book that talks about dreams, tries to explain dreams and all, what goes on in the brain when we dream, what phase of sleep actually we would have dreams and so on. So what I found actually that dreams actually happen during REM sleep. And during REM sleep, actually, and talked about this earlier, the brain is actually active as if someone is awake, and it's actually even could be more like up to 30% more active. And it's during that REM sleep time or stage when our cognitive abilities decrease, while we still have this kind of motor and emotion autobiographical memory areas of the brain that are being active And I think earlier in the book, he also talked about how, like during the REM sleep, because the brain is so active, and also because of the dreams, as we'll mention here, the brain might start giving these kind of motor actions for, like, for our limbs to act, like, move an arm or something. And that's why the brain sends that signal to our muscles, to the spine, to shut off, kind of. I mean, it's kind of, we are paralyzed, and we are kind of, the muscles cannot move. So it's interesting, this relationship of how, like, during REM, the brain is very active and might send this motor, signals, but at the same time, the muscles are, are kind of paralyzed and cannot move. It's also interesting that, like, 35 to 55 of the emotions an individual experience while awake can resurface back in dreams. So here in this chapter, I mean, talking about, like, how they could, use MRI technology and brain activity to find out if someone is dreaming or not, and even getting it a little bit deeper into trying to interpret what's going on. I mean, during that dream. I mean, what kind of activity it could be? Is it something related to, memory? Is it something related to movement, and so on? So again, in this chapter, trying to share what they've learned about the construction of dreams, and what this authors also of the mind that dreams can be deeply problematic, and so on. So used MRI technology, as said earlier, doing brain scans that basically helped, claiming, explaining how dreams arise from our own experiences and from memories that we had before. It was also found, like, by other research and scientists, I forget the exact scientist name, that actually it's like 1 to 2% of dream content from their residue. So I found this actually, the whole part on dreams, pretty interesting in terms of trying to explain how dreams happen and what they can. But I think this is an area that I feel like, it's still ambiguous, and I think that was also mentioned in the talk here. And also from, things that we know and our the beliefs, like, we know dreams might be related to things that are kind of, we know what we call it, maybe the ahlam and the bu'at and so other things. So it's, I mean, there are so many things here, I believe, that can be related to dreams beyond just explaining, what's physically going through our minds. I mean, dreams, the way the author also talked about them, they are kind of thought as, like, a way of therapy. So dreaming can help recover from painful experiences without feeling the associated pain. And he talked, I mean, pretty much in pretty much detail about this, and how, like, dreaming about something that happened before without, like, feeling the pain would help actually someone to recover from that traumatic kind of experience. Talking again about the relationship between REM, rapid eye movement, sleep, and dreams, and how they both help our emotional and mental health and rejuvenate our emotional resolution, and how, like, dreams and REM sleep are essential for problem solving and creativity. And here actually, where I think he talks about how, sometimes, some of the great inventions and some of the people who had great ideas had them actually in dreams, and this happens during this REM phase. We talked earlier about, like, how REM is actually, this is the phase of sleep where the brain is making connections and is trying to kind of infer new knowledge from things that we have learned before. So it makes sense to to have this kind of conclusion here that during REM sleep is when we when someone might actually come up with these new ideas and come up with solve certain problems. And there are many examples like of people, and I think many examples mentioned in the book as well, of people who dreamed of something which became eventually a big thing and like an invention. I hear that from many people, friends and so on, that they at certain working on certain issues, problems, and they dream the solution and just implement the next day. And I think personally, I believe something like this might have happened. Maybe not a dream, but at least like you sleep on something, you were working on something, and you couldn't solve it. Relating to my experience in work, like working on code or writing code for something, or kind of computer-related problem, and then you sleep. Next day, you have the solution. I mean, it could be a dream. It could be just the way the brain works during the REM phase. Making the connections, and eventually you have it. You have the solution. So again, interesting here, making this connection between the REM phase of sleep and dreams. And I think I can go all the way to this. The third chapter in this part. Let me just cover this one and then go back to discussion. So we know that during REM sleep consolidation, consolidation of memories happens, and then during REM, the interconnections happen, and the integration and the inferences and all that, all that kind of making the new knowledge and connections. It was interesting that REM sleep was also observed in language learning in infants. So they actually observed that when infants are learning in language, learning how to talk, how to interpret language and letters. The REM sleep was actually active and actually could help with that process. It does also talk here about how memory association happens during REM, and this is just a graph here, a diagram that shows how different semantic concepts can be linked together, like giving example from University of California, Berkeley, and different entities, different words, and how they can be connected together, and how the brain actually kind of simulate this process and can go through this process. So I think that's kind of the overall summary of this third part with its 3 chapters: dreams, how they can make how they can be helpful for painful experiences from before, how they can help in coming up with the creative ideas and solving problems, and how REM is connected to dreams, and how actual dreams happen during this phase of sleep. So open it back to discussion and comments here if anyone has anything to add.
I want to ask, since mashallah this group has many professionals and many of them are high achievers, so I want to ask how many experience that they solve a problem or came up with a novel solution from their dream specifically. And if we can share some ideas, or everybody can say yeah, I really did something and came from my dream, that will be very interesting. I start with myself. I actually solved many problems in my business through the dream. And whether it's a mutual fund, a dilemma that we have, compliance issues, sometimes even technology ideas, like how we solve certain issues. And I confirm, I agree 100%, and I remember many instances where I found the solution in the dream. Anybody?
I can. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All I can say is that I work in pharmaceutical chemical companies and high-tech companies like Intel, and then also in the government. When I had issues to resolve, solution development and all that, I would pray to Allah, Ya Rabbul Alameen, give me some stuff. So I cannot say what worked, whether it was my dua that helped me make the connections, and I went through who know what, when, where, how, and who knows what and where and how, and some that process. I was thinking about it for a long time, and in my dream, I said, "Have you tapped into this? Have you looked at that?" And I came back and said, "No, I hadn't." And so I don't know whether it was premeditated or I have no idea. But yes, answer is yes. When issues arise, I have found that thinking about it a lot and sleeping on it helped me develop solutions, actionable items, and both in the international space as well as immediately long-term strategic planning. Thanks.
Good.
I'm just interested. How about istikhara? I never done one myself, but my wife always does.
Yes.
I strongly believe in them, and it works.
MashaAllah. Nice.
How? The question is how. I mean, again, from the scientific point, this is our faith, this is our belief system. Does it override logic and scientific evidence, or is there anything along that line linking faith with solution development?
Yeah.
No.
Very interesting.
As I said personally, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm someone who doesn't usually remember dreams exactly, but I've been in that kind of experience where, I have an issue, I can't solve it. I sleep on it, next morning, I'm just going through it and as if I've done it before. I mean, was it a dream? Was it during REM, something got, interconnected? So that's my experience.
Well, he talked about this earlier in the book when he meets that pianist, and the pianist comes and tells him, I always make that mistake when I'm playing. The next morning, it's gone. So his dream perfected it, and the skills sharpened the skills. To me, I don't recall I saw a dream and then I solved something, but in that twilight in the beginning, I get a lot of those, and I used to lose them, those ideas, and then I started to just get up, just one line, because now I know that I'm going to remember that one line, what it is, and then the next day, I'll be able to come up with some idea that I don't think that I have thought before, and I could build on it. So that happens in the very early stages of the sleep.
I have a question for the first generation here about the dreams. Any of you remember when you start dreaming in English after you've been here for a while, because when we start coming to the States, our dreams was still in Arabic, but it came a time, when the dreams changed and you start dreaming in English. Anyone has that experience?
First of all, Brother Mustafa, we are all first generation. We don't have anybody.
It's very interesting, that concept that somebody said, if you dream in a language and you curse in a language, I think it was Ahmed Didat who said that is your mother tongue. When I am dreaming, when I'm with Americans or I speak that language, it's fascinating you ask that question. But when I'm I'm from Hyderabad, India, so I speak, when I'm with my relatives and all that, I find myself speaking Urdu. So it is with whom I am, that reflects the language I'm using.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I have an experience when I was in graduate school. My advisor was Japanese, and he also has postdoctoral fellows from Japan, 3 of them, and they used to speak Japanese almost all the time. And even if we go on social events, they speak Japanese as well, And during that time, it came also a time where when I dream about work or with these Japanese friends, and they speak in my dream in Japanese as if I don't know how my memory caught these Japanese language phrases, and sometimes I talk to them back and they say, "You speak Japanese?" I said, "No." But I freshly recall that the whole conversation that they were talking in my dream was in Japanese,
Wow.
Amazing.
Very interesting.
Okay, so I think we can move forward here. And now we get to the fourth part of the book, which actually the author dedicated to talk more about sleeping pills and sleeping aids and how this society transformed. Also talking about some sleep disorders that are pretty common these days. And in chapter 12, actually, this is where these sleep disorders were discussed, mainly highlighting 4 different types of sleep disorders. Somnambulism, which is basically when someone is actually sleep-talking or sleepwalking. This occurs in the deep sleep phase and REM. And in this phase, the individual is neither awake nor asleep. So it's actually pretty common, and almost all humans kind of experience this at some point. It's normal according to the author, and again, many people actually experience this. But if it increases and it becomes a concerning thing, where especially if someone is sleepwalking and they might get into might increase risk of falling or causing any physical damage to themselves. This is where help might be needed. Another pretty common thing that is widely known and common is insomnia. This is the most common sleep disorder, which is basically inability to sleep. And it can happen in one of 2 forms. Onset insomnia, where someone has difficulty to sleep, they cannot even go to sleep. And the other form is maintenance insomnia, where it's hard to stay asleep. So someone can go to sleep, but they find it extremely hard to stay asleep, and they keep getting awake. So it's interesting. I don't know, why it's twice as common in women than in men, according to the book. And it does have psychological and emotional causes. So this is the most, again, common sleep disorder. Narcolepsy. This is due to a gene mutation. It's not inheritable. It has many symptoms, including sleeping during the day, sleep paralysis, cataplexy. So, and it's triggered by extreme emotions. It's around 1 in 2,000 people suffer from this neurological disorder. And then the last disorder discussed here, excuse me, is FFI, fatal familial insomnia, which can cause decline of cognitive abilities. Organs might be affected. It might lead to hallucination and delusions. It doesn't have treatment. And actually, I think it's mentioned in the book that if someone has this disorder, eventually they can actually die in about 10 months. So again, these are the most common sleep disorders that were discussed in this chapter. So any comment, any addition here?
One time he mentioned that using
using the melatonin as a cure for, or as a treatment for the insomnia, and that's he's saying that this really it cannot really treat the insomnia because that's related to the darkness. And it's just like, you know, he resembled this as a set of race where you just to set the race. But if that works, must be not related to the melatonin itself. So that's something he mentioned. Also, I'm not sure if if something you're gonna be talking about, like using, for example, sleeping pill to treat those. And he's saying like there is nothing can, these are not providing you with a solution for the sleeping disorder or sleeping problem. And people sometimes claim alcohol or marijuana or stuff. He's saying these are, like, especially alcohol, many people under the impression that can help the sleep. And actually, it actually does the opposite. It creates a lot of disrupting in your sleep. So that's not really also helpful. Here you go. You got it. That one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, the way this part of the book was actually kind of structured, it starts like in chapter 12 talking about sleep disorders that I just mentioned, and the next chapter, which is 13, this is where it talks about sleep obstacles, and this is where things like alcohol actually are mentioned. I mean, you just talked about alcohol, and it's actually affects, it's like it prevents neurons from sending chemicals through the brain. They can cause actually fragmented sleep, like, you know, people actually think that actually they can sleep better when they get alcohol, but what happens actually, they go to sleep, they keep waking up throughout the night, and they are not getting that good quality of sleep. They don't even recollect this, they don't even remember this the next morning, but the effect is there. It affects the quantity of REM sleep as well. Losing this REM sleep eventually can cause many damages. So since we're talking about this, and since I brought this up, I mean, alcohol is just one of these sleep obstacles, but there are many others. So I'll get to light latest because I think this is the most interesting one here. Temperature is important as well to fall asleep successfully. The core body temperature needs to drop like by 1-2 degrees. So regulated temperature might not actually be good, and it's not actually to have like the room temperature to drop. I think like 65 Fahrenheit is a good temperature to for the body to go and sleep. Also, it's important to remember, I mean, there are so many factors, or like so many things that can affect sleep. Temperature is one of them, but light also affects that. So both temperature and light, I mean, work together to release melatonin. And this is where, like, you know, in the next chapter, when it talks about sleeping pills and using melatonin, you know, as a sleeping aid, and the fact that it doesn't actually do any good, because it just kind of give the body this fake kind of feeling that sleep is needed. I mean, basically, it's kind of stimulating the cycle, but the sleep, the body is not actually generating it naturally, which is actually what could be causing a really good quality sleep. It talks here also about, like, you know, things like alarms. It's interesting this was mentioned here, like, you know, how, you know, using an alarm clock to wake up in the morning, and how this like, you know, the sound when it and the shock it can it goes to the heart, and you know, increase the heart pressure, the pressure, the blood pressure, and how actually snoozing it and going through the cycle multiple times might even be more damaging. So interesting to have this mentioned here. And now I want to go actually and talk about light, and I think in this chapter this got covered in an interesting way, starting with how, like, you know, the invention of electric light, you know, actually started with like fire and all the way to electric light, and how the invention of electric light actually changed how our suprachiasmatic actual nucleus, because it does depend on light to kind of as one of the senses that would trigger like, you know, the circadian cycle. And having more light during the night, like, you know, because of all the you know, the electric lights, and later on talk about like also the devices that we use, all this is actually affecting our ability to sleep in a negative way. So it's delaying, you know, the release of melatonin in the body. So our brains no longer get signal of darkness, and this halts the natural release of melatonin. Same actual effect happens by using LED devices, or devices that like have LED screens that emit blue wavelengths. This actually also have bad effects on the melatonin levels, and it basically, like using an eye bath for 2 hours before going to bed can reduce melatonin levels, by 23%.
Oh.
Imagine, you know, how badly this can affect, like, you know, someone going into sleep. Again, I mean, it's interesting, you know, how the relationship between specifically devices that have LED screens that generate or emit blue wavelengths, and you know, melatonin, and the being able to go to sleep early and getting a good quality sleep. So all these sleep obstacles, I think, like at least the light and, you know, alarms are kind of products of the industrialized kind of society that we live in. I mean, alcohol is an old problem, but it's like more prevalent these days, but definitely has all those bad effects. And since we already talked about, like, you know, hurting, you know, and helping your sleep, you know, sleep drugs and their effects, I mean, they can create a vicious like cycle that is very harmful on the long term, because it's kind of imitating or simulating, like, you know, the urge to sleep, but it's not actually naturally generated by the body. So it doesn't actually give the same quality sleep as if this was happening, you know, naturally. And also using these sleep drugs and pills can actually create a dependency on them, and not taking them, you know, might cause someone to suffer in the future, and it becomes more of kind of, I would use the word addiction here to some extent. But this graph here shows, like, you know, the number of sleeping pills used per year, or like, you know, the increase in the use or the usage of sleeping pills throughout the years, and how this can affect the or increase the risks or the odds of risk of death. So I mean, I think the conclusion I got from the book and reading about like sleeping pills and all sleeping aids is, you know, they are no good in general, and if we can get to some other means, like, you know, electrical and auditory simulation methods that are kind of new ways of doing with this, cognitive behavior therapy, trying to find out what is causing, you know, the issue with like lack of sleep, if there is any emotional or any psychiatric kind of reasons, that would be a better approach rather than using pills. Anyone like to add any comment here?
Brother Ahmad, on the previous slide, the last sleep obstacle was alarms. Can you just give a couple sentences on what the book mentioned on this? Like, do we have to avoid setting up alarms, or is there an alternative? Because it looks like there's a harmful effects on, like, alarm clock causes heart rate and blood pressure increase due to the shock. So what do we do?
Sorry. Yeah, I don't recall like any proposed kind of solution to this. I think it was more of like highlighting the effect of this on the heart and the body. Again, I mean, we have many doctors here, so if anyone can chip in and provide any kind of recommendation on how to deal with this issue, or if there are any actually evidence, you know, supporting this, you know, from practice as well. So
I've heard that there's people that are used to getting up at the same exact time every day, they don't really need to use alarms. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anybody actually practices that.
I think this goes back to, like, you know, if we are getting like the amount of sleep that we usually need, which is around 8 hours, and we're getting the good quality sleep as well, and we get into this like cycle, you know, I mean, rhythm, regular basis without interrupting it. Eventually, I think we will do it because, I mean, if we sleep at a certain time and we get accustomed to wake up at a certain time, I mean, we don't need these alarms, at least from personal experience. I can talk here. The other thing is, it's interesting, like, you know, I personally feel this, like if I know like the next morning I have something important, like say I'm traveling, like, you know, I have to catch a flight or something, I wake up normally, like even before the alarm. So I think that also supports what you are talking about here, that we use these alarms most probably, I think, because we are not following the, I mean, we are not getting that quality good sleep. We are not actually, you know, practicing, I would say, the following good practices, best practices to get that good sleep. Again, I'm back for anyone to
Yeah, I have a physician client in Columbia, Maryland. He's a doctor, and they have a rooster in their house. And they use it honestly. And I asked him one time, I said, rooster in Columbia, Maryland, beautiful neighborhood, and have these like rooster roaming around the house. I don't know how he keep it, but they use it as a natural alarm to keep them to wake up on time. And so maybe we could maybe think about a way to do this here. Like, you know, if you can bring rooster, that probably better than alarm.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to in the alarm part is like if people who are dependent on alarms to wake up, and if they're having erratic sleep, so like basically you sleep in the wrong time every day or different times every day, and you only wake up to an alarm. So basically, alarms is interrupting your sleep, and you don't know when it's actually it's interrupting a cycle or it's interrupting a REM sleep. So basically, you need to get enough number of cycles, 4 to 5 cycles every night to get a good sleep. So depending on alarms to wake up every day in a different time, I think that's what is causing this biological effects. But as you mentioned, Ahmed, and many people, like if you sleep every day, I think the best practice is to actually sleep every day at the same time and wake up at the same time. This way, you can only use the alarm clock as like safety network. So basically, if you have like an important you don't want to miss in the morning, you can set the alarms. And I personally, when I have a certain routine, I often wake up before the alarms, 5 minutes before the alarms, and I turn it off so it doesn't interrupt or wake up anybody, you know, like my wife or somebody sleeping in, or my kid when they sleep in, my boy when they sleep in my bed. So basically, it's if you sleep at the same time, wake up in the same time, you probably don't need the alarm unless it's as a backup plan. For the sleep. That's I think that's what he's referring to.
One thing I think is missing from this book, although it is heavily based on research, 20 years research, is that it deals with sleep within the Western culture. Meaning, you go to bed if you're gonna get, and he talks about this and alludes to it, like how kids wake up now to go to school early. If they're going to be at school at 7:30, that means they wake up at 6:30 or 6 o'clock, and they get out. If they go on the bus, in fact, that means they get on the bus at 6 o'clock. That means they wake up 5:30 or 5 o'clock, and that means if you go back, that means that when they're not getting their sleep. And there were trials done in, I think, in Norway. In Norway, he talks about that, where they pushed the start of start of the school time 1 hour, and they saw an increase in test scores and comprehension among those kids. So this brings me to like what he's talking about within the Western culture is that, okay, you have to get your 8 hours of sleep, understood. But that means that you have to we go to work at the same time, regardless of what's happening within the lunar, the seasonal change with the time, and the night and the days are increasing. He talks about a very interesting phenomena, which is the 1 hour daytime saving light. On that night, when we lose 1 hour, and there's an increase in heart attacks at that day, the next day. And then when you gain it like 6 months later in November, there's a decrease in heart attacks. That tells you how much it's important. And this brings me to the issue of the Islamic sleeping, the Islamic culture sleeping, because our time should revolve, although it doesn't, on waking up at Fajr, which is the dawn, or maybe a little after that, and then doing the prayers and staying awake until noon or after Dhuhr, so after the afternoon prayer, and then taking the siesta nap, which is called qaylule, and not the one after Asr, which is called aylule. It's called to feel ill. I mean, this is the word for it. And then continuing until Isha, and then after Isha, just like praying and rushing to sleep. So using the day, this is the verse you opened with, and then using the night to sleep. My problem with this now is, so what happens during when the night is short?
It's summertime.
Sleep. So during summertime, night is short, and then you go to sleep at like after Isha. You have to stay awake, especially if you're in the northern hemisphere, and then you have to wake up like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in Ramadan. So what happens in those times? I think the
you go back to sleep after Fajr.
What's that?
You go back to sleep after Fajr.
Well, yeah, I know, but you've interrupted your sleep. But here's what I think, but I don't have evidence on it. I think those guys that used to wake up, they wake up before Fajr, and they do some recitation or they do some Qiyam al-Layl. There's no research about it. I would have loved some Muslim sleep scientists to do that, attach all the electrodes and see what happens when you recite from memory. I bet you that those NREM waves, because they start from here, they start from the Nasiya, and this Nasiya Khati'atin Kadiba, he talks in 2 places about this, about how this area, when it doesn't receive sleep, it becomes, it perceives reality in an incorrect way, and it commits mistakes about that. So I don't know. That's one thing I had to struggle throughout the book, is how to reconcile my sleep with what he's recommending.
I have a comment on that. We talk about waking up and the kids going. In fact, I think certain states on the East Coast have moved the children's starting time by half an hour, based, I think, on the studies in Europe. And they need, this is an NSF study ongoing. I think by 2024, they should be able to come up, say, did the scores increase by giving that extra sleep? My question that I have is, we talked about sleeping pills and all that. I, for one, I can have double espresso, Indian music playing on the side with my family, and I am gone. When I fall asleep, the lights can be on, and when I close my eyes, that's it. I don't need any sleeping pills. In fact, I had coffee and dessert and everything. What is it? I'm not the only one. I have a cousin. You can play the whole music loud, and when we get together in families late at night after Isha, where everybody is trying to sing and be an artist and all that. And he and I would just go to sleep. I'm tired. I'm going to go to sleep, and that's it. How does that work? What is it that triggers certain individuals? And my wife can have only 1 cup of coffee, and she's wide awake till past midnight. She said, I can go to sleep. So is there something in the hormones of the body makeup, or is it my I feel that when I go to sleep, then I do my prayers in my heart and all that. I say, God, Ya Allah, wake me up at Fajr. That's it. I'm gone.
Yeah, interesting. And I had same kind of questions. I mean, back to what Dr. Tariq said earlier, how we make the connection with what is written in this book with like some of the kind of Islamic practices that we know. I was hoping actually while going through the book that at some point there would be something like about, doing some research or like experience in other cultures or anything that would, at least touch that area, but none of that actually I think was found in the book. And also like, when it talks about all the health benefits of sleeping early and all the issues with sleeping pills, caffeine and all that, I kind of, I felt the same, like, yeah, there are people that don't have this effect. But I think also the book says, I mean, it's always like, it's always like numbers and statistics showing like certain percentage of people will be affected by so and so. I don't have the explanation. I don't think the book went to that level of explaining why the rest of people don't have the same effect, let's say, of caffeine, but I think that's an obvious question based on what we have read in this book.
If I make a
point I'm trying to make here is it because is there something about the willpower that say I gotta go sleep and that's it, and then when I lie down, it's an old Indian thinking. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, may Allah bless her, she always said, see if you can, when you fall, close your eyes and see if you can feel your toes and your fingertip. Okay, I don't know, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure you all know people who can fall asleep with music and laughter and TV on. So anyway, thank you so much. It was very informative.
Yeah, Dr. Ahmad Shami I was going to make a comment.
Yes. So, we're talking about the caffeine thing. Well, we know everybody has different metabolism. Even now, there's some thoughts about, even when you give someone medication, 5 milligrams of this. Now, it doesn't have the same effect on another person. So you have the metabolism of every person. That's number one. Number two is really the healthy habits of sleep. If you're in a routine and you have this biological clock, that's another factor. The third one is, are you really getting good night of sleep? Like the narcolepsy that you mentioned, Brother Ahmad?
Yes.
You mentioned as a disease. It really it's a symptom. It's the symptoms that if you're not getting good quality sleep at night, you have this narcolepsy. And this for Dr. Tariq, when you mentioned about like a driving when you sleep deprived, that's what patients they go through, the narcolepsy. You mentioned about sleeping pills and death. The problem is when we sleep, typically our breathing slows down, right? And then when our CO2 goes up, that's how the signals goes to their brain, say, hey, you need to wake up and breathe more. If someone has a sleep apnea, right? So they have this really not well balanced, and you give them sleeping pills, and then that will affect the way they wake up their brain, and this is how they usually go into pretty much death. But they're taking other medications with it. So sleeping pills, it really plays with the mechanism of how we send the signals to our brain to say, well, you need to breathe more. When you give them the sleeping pills, you suppress this, and that could be fatal.
Thanks for the the addition and clarification here. Okay, so I think we can get to the kind of last part of the book here, where it talks more about like society and how the sleep habits have changed recently, and how this can affect performance at work, productivity, and all these things. So kind of 100 years ago, less than 2% of the population in the US slept 6 hours or less a night. Now almost 30% of adults do. So why should we care about this? Because if we are sleep deprived, that would actually negatively affect job performance, productivity, creativity. And I think in this chapter, he talked a little bit about NASA and Google and how they made, NASA, how they made research into, improving sleep, for astronauts and astronauts. Actually relating this back to light and the blue light, and how they actually developed this light that they can have in spaceships, and that could help astronauts to go in sleep cycles. So it's all connected together. Talking specifically about adolescents and how sleep deprivation can lead to chronic mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, and all these things. Talks specifically about medical residents and who work for long shifts, and with that they have a 30% more chance of making mistakes. I think that's interesting to mention here. We have a graph here that shows, kind of compares some nations, showing their GDP and the global economic cost of sleep loss in different nations. So interesting. This was actually a report by the Rand Corporation that showed the economic cost of insufficient sleep, for CFOs, CEOs, and for employees. So interesting effects. The last chapter in the book kind of tries to set a vision for sleep. What should be done on different levels: individual level, educational, interventional level, organizational level, public policy and government, and societal. So basically, the importance of understanding the repercussions of lack of sleep, and why this is a problem, and why it's a hard problem to address with all the the lifestyle that we have, the culture, the Western culture, and all those issues. The importance of educating people about the dangers of lack of sleep, and how it's vital and important to have good quality and enough sleep. Also, the importance for organization to recognize that. And at some point in the book, it also talked, for example, about there are people who are morning people that wake early and work throughout the day. Some people that are kind of more that prefer to work at night, and how this has to do with the genes and all that stuff, and how organizations should recognize that, because and companies, enterprises. I mean, if everyone has to show up at 8 a.m. in the morning, and how this can affect their productivity, if they're not getting good sleep, or if they are not actually the type of person that would perform, or would have their best performance in the early morning. So all these things have to be considered, all the way to the government and the bigger society to again understand the importance of sleep, and how to how to improve our sleep quality. Developing good sleep patterns as well. And then I think there was this conclusion, to sleep or not to sleep. Yes, we need to sleep. Sleep, sleep loss is an epidemic, according to the author, that has public health challenges, and we have to face that. We have to reclaim our right to a full night of sleep. And I find this interesting, without embarrassment or the damaging stigma of laziness. Someone is sleeping 8 or let's say more than 7 hours to be kind of considered like a lazy person. I think that's an important thing. I mean, that made me always like think again on how we deal with our kids. I mean, in terms of their sleep patterns and practices, and how school, waking up early to school, going early to bed, and all these things. So it's important to consider all these things. Last thing, just to make sure we look at sleep as an essential, important component that regulates our physiological and emotional health. So it's important to recognize that sleep is as important as I think mentioned in the first slide, like first chapter. It's like the fourth drive that we should consider, like, as a complement to eating, drinking, and reproducing. So I think that's the last thing I have here. It was definitely an interesting book to read. I learned a lot. I questioned many things as well, as we said earlier, like it didn't answer definitely everything, but I think I'm looking forward personally to see, if I make some changes to some of my habits and patterns in sleep, and how this would actually affect my productivity and the quality of life in general. So I think this is a good time to have some final kind of discussion. And Prophet Dr. Tariq, back to you.
Thank you so much. It was an excellent presentation. And I want to just, because from this last one, it's in the middle one, in the conclusion, it is time to reclaim right to a full night of sleep without embarrassment or the damaging stigma of laziness. Because there is this thing that those who sleep and they brag about it. I only sleep 4 hours a night. I sleep 5 hours a night, and then they look like they are the sharper, and then whoever is sleeping 8 hours looks like the lazy. He talks about this in a very funny way in the book, where he says, parenthetically and unscientifically, I have always found it curious that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, two heads of state that were very vocal, if not proud, about sleeping only 4 to 5 hours a night, both went on to develop the ruthless disease, meaning Alzheimer's. The current US President, Donald Trump, also a proclaimer of sleeping just a few hours each night, may want to take note. He says the guy is he's online every night tweeting. He doesn't go to sleep. And maybe that's why his mental capacity is going down. That could explain. Here's the thought. Now, all of us, we come from the Middle East. In the Middle East, they don't sleep. I mean, at night. They sleep during the day. They stay awake all night, watching TV, playing, and smoking shisha until like the wee hours of the morning. Then they go, and then they wake up, and then of course they go to work, like dragging themselves to work. I think this book should be also directed at those guys to try to bring this to their attention, that what you're doing is disastrous to your health. Forget about the society, just think about yourself. You're subjecting yourself to Alzheimer's, immune disease, cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, sleep apnea, and all that comes with it. I think we should reproduce this in Arabic and direct it at them, because they stand to benefit from this book a lot. And the second thought is, couple this with the other book that Brother Noor presented, which is the Atomic Habit, which tells you as an atomic habit of how to go to sleep every night. And only your bedroom is for sleep. Don't sleep anywhere else at home, otherwise it will interrupt your sleep. And this guy also alludes to this in this, especially as we grow older. He says you need to don't doze off like 5 or 6 o'clock. Try to stay awake until bedtime to push it off, because if you doze off at 5, 6 o'clock, you've just ruined your night of sleep, because you're not going to be able to go to sleep at night. So those are some of the thoughts that came to my mind.
It's very interesting. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just to comment on the medical residents. I guess I'm one of the oldest guy here in this session. When I did my residency, it was in the mid-70s. We used to be like slaves. So we used to come at 6 in the morning, and when we take on call, and we don't leave till 6 p.m. the following day, like 36 hours straight, sometimes 24 hours. Well, finally, they did a lot of the medical center and university. They did study. They found the result what the book talked about, that the mistakes are more common. The production is lousy. So they forbidden. Now there is a law that you cannot make the resident do these hours. They have to make sure that they sleep 8 hours. Now, I was listening to the video lecture that Tariq sent it to me. It's really interesting. And he's talking about certain things that lack of sleep, not only the hours, how many, 8 hours, and also the quality of sleep.
Right.
So that improves the immune system. And that's why in Western culture now, or any culture that they don't sleep enough, you see the cancer, the immune disease, shingles and all that is very, very common. And also you talk about something that we didn't discuss, it's ED. For men, their sexual activity, definitely, statistically, people who don't sleep good, they get weaker and weaker. The testosterone is measured much less. And also studying and the effectiveness of the brain. I know from myself, since I was in high school and baccalaureate and studying in the college and for the board, you're more effective when you sleep and then wake up in the morning and start to study in the morning. Your brain is fresh and you can retain more. And we see this in the Quran. Yani the Quran focuses so many places about reading the Quran. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Quran al-Fajri kana mashhuda. And I think it's a hint to us that sleep good, wake up, and then read the Quran. You retain more, you understand more. And also the Prophet ﷺ said, Burika li ummati fi bukuriha. It means Allah put barakah to ummati when they wake up early and do their stuff, which means you have a good night's sleep and then you start your day fresh. I don't want to, thank you very much. That was an excellent session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Ahmed, for the presentation. Excellent one. Thank you. But for who read the whole book, I feel that it's more of like a statistical, scientific, just giving facts. But I don't know if he touched about like general recommendations to improve the quality of sleep. Like, do we have like a takeaway from this book, like rules of thumb to improve our quality of sleep? And did he touch at all the white noise, like relation between good sleep and white noise? Like me personally, I've noticed the pediatrician told us to put white noise for the baby. She was having trouble sleeping. It's like sound of waves or a fan or something, which would remind the baby of the sounds when she was inside the womb. So did the book touch on the white noise topic at all?
I don't think it touched on this specifically, but I recall, like, the author talking about using like sounds to induce, like, some reactions while people are sleeping. I forgot where exactly in the book that was mentioned, which chapter, which part, but I mean some kind of connection between sound during sleep and sleep. My take from the book on like how to get quality sleep. No specific direct recommendations like one final chapter, but I think throughout the book many things were highlighted, like for example making sure to get the full sleep, and don't get distracted with like light. That was mentioned specifically, blue wavelength light, devices, LED devices like tablets before sleep, trying to and these kind of things. So again, I don't think it didn't focus specifically on giving a list of recommendations, but there were many things mentioned.
Basically, avoiding the obstacles, those like the slide that mention the obstacles, I guess.
The last is
let-
basic. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me add something here, like on appendix, and on the last page on the appendix,
That's what I wanted to talk about.
the author actually have the 12 tips for healthy sleep.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of them is to stick to a sleep schedule and to exercise at least 3 to 4 hours and so forth. So he has a couple of pages here, very valuable information. I would say it summarizes the book in terms of what to do rather than how it's done.
Can you, brother, take a picture of those couple pictures, or scan them and send them to the group, please? I didn't really buy the book, so
Yeah, sure.
I would really appreciate it if you can share that. Thank
Sure.
you. Jazakallah khair.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll take those and we can send them to the group as well.
Okay.
So this was an excellent presentation. I just want to thank everyone. And before we leave, I want to remind you, this is, as usual, this is the next book for the next month. It's called Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, Portuguese guy. This book was written 1968. It's a classic. And it's going to be discussed by Brother Hassan Kurdi. It's a really fascinating book, maybe a little difficult to read, but it's not a long book. It's shorter than this one. If you watch The Two Popes, the movie The Two Popes, this book, when the second pope, where the Argentinian pope recollects his memories and how he didn't stand with the freedom movement in Argentina, they bring this book on the screen of that in the 60s when things got written about that dictatorship era. And it has to do also with what is happening in the Middle East. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about this. Jazakumullah khair for attending. This was a very enriched discussion. Maybe, well, if you could also send us the PDF.
Sure, inshallah.
It would be excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.